Let's get started then. So welcome everyone. I'm Joanna. I'm the marketing manager at BookBoost, and BookBoost is a CRM designed for hospitality. And we hold these webinars monthly to talk about all these topics that hoteliers are curious about, what is trending, what is changing, and how we can get better results for our properties. So today we are going to discuss everything about how guest loyalty is changing, because there is a very interesting shift in the industry and we will be discussing about it. It's not just going to be me. I'm surrounded by two experts on this topic that are going to help us go through some key points about it. And I'm going to introduce them now. So we have from Guest Revu, Amy Branford. Hi, Amy, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. So lovely to meet everybody, and thank you so much for having me on the webinar. So for anybody that doesn't know what guest review is, it's a guest feedback and online reputation management solution. And I've been with guest review for 9 years. And I had the pleasure of working with Mark for quite a few of those years. So it's really nice to be on a webinar with you, Mark.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining. And we have Mark Evans from BookBoost. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Joanna. Thanks for having me. Yes, I used to work at Guest Review a few years back, working with Amy, so familiar with how the guest feedback plays into what we're talking about today. And I'm the sales director in the UK, so I am in chilly Scotland at the moment. Yeah, ready to chat and talk a little bit more about these trends that we've identified.
Absolutely. So, Mark, where you are is a little bit chilly, same as here. Amy, where are you located?
South Africa. So it is a beautiful sunny day here, but it's a little bit chilly inside the house. So I do have it.
Okay, you're trying to like help us feel better a little bit. Okay,
Absolutely.
perfect. So let's get started then with all the points that we have today. I want to remind you guys that you can ask questions. You can use the chat function or the Q&A function to ask whatever you want to know. If you need us to clarify on some points or help with something, please just use the chat and we will answer your questions as well. So why are we talking about guest loyalty today? The main aspect that we've noticed in the industry is that the way it used to work is not longer working. So old loyalty programs with a traditional structure, it's not giving the results that we wish it was giving. Why? Because guest expectations are changing. And guest expectations change all the time. So what guests used to like 10 years ago or even 5 years ago is not the same as what they want today. So then the question is, how can properties hospitality business start adapting to all these shifts that include loyalty? It's not just that the experience is changing. Loyalty is also changing. And that's what we are discussing today. So let's get started and bounce around a few questions to exchange opinions. And the main question I would say to get started is, why is this shift happening? I mentioned a little bit, but let's dive deeper into this. So, Mark, the first question goes for you, and it's about, why do you think that traditional loyalty programs that rely on points normally, right? That's what we see. Why are those programs losing relevance in today's hospitality landscape? And if you can maybe help us with some examples so we have clarity around this.
Sure. I just saw a question from Alexandra asking if we're recording this. I believe we are, Joanna, so everyone will get a recording afterwards. Great. Why are traditional loyalty programs losing relevance? And I think let's start with, I'm pretty sure the really big brands, the Accors and the Hiltons and the Marriotts, they were sitting listening to that question, would have a bunch of data to say, we're still doing pretty all right with our loyalty programs. It's doing okay. But I think it's about your emotional connection to a brand, or why you're making your decisions when we think about what does loyalty actually mean. So let me step back from that. If you're going to give me a cheaper price, if you're going to be the right location, if you're going to, these are definitely reasons why I'm booking. I'm booking because it's cheaper. I'm booking because it's closer. I'm booking for these different convenience reasons. But that's not loyalty, right? Loyalty is something that's an emotional connection. Loyalty makes me feel something towards a brand. And it makes me feel valued, right? Not just your now blue points, your green points, your pink points, or you have 100 points or 1,000 points. It's Black Friday, right? I can't tell you how many emails and things I'm getting where I'm just looking at going, these people don't know me. They have no idea of what's actually triggering my decisions. I'm just being told, you've bought 8 coffees, you've got 2 more to go. You have 9,000 air miles and you can, come book a flight. All these things that I'm being told about various loyalties are transactional, right? And it's not about how it's making me feel, and it's not about me, and it's not about the value that's being placed on my business. Right? And so I think that's what's starting to shift, is that it's not that there isn't a place for a loyalty program. It's not that there isn't something that makes me want to go, well, if I give you more loyalty, I should receive more in return. That transaction, there is a place for that, but it's more about how you're making me feel, and do I feel valued? I think if we're coming out of the back of something like COVID, and if we are talking about Gen Zs and the Instagram generation all searching for experiences, it's going to be experience and exceeding expectation that makes me feel valued, that makes me feel like you understand me, that drives me back to your property, not going from 800 points to 1,000 points. That's driving a very different, almost casino thinking approach.
Exactly.
I think, Mark, back in the day, when the point system came into place, that was kind of the extent a guest could expect from personalization. So, nowadays you can segment the data in so many different ways, right? You can create that guest journey from the moment they make that booking. So I think what guests expect as personalization has also changed. So it's not, hi, John Smith, you've got 300 room points. It's much more of a conversational thing, whether they like cycling or running, whether they stay as a family, and really kind of enhancing that messaging for the segmentation rather than just the points that they get, maybe more so nowadays.
And that's what's making that guest then feel valued, making that guest feel understood, far more than a number of points or a tier status or something does. And so I think that's what people are looking for. I think there are great examples in the industry of people that are taking those steps to create really personalized experiences. I heard a story just last week where someone was saying, well, someone's made a booking, we know they've got a dairy allergy, so we've put oat milk in the fridge. It's something so small.
Exactly.
But you've gone and you've exceeded expectations. And then if we go back to your original question, Johanna, which was loyalty, if we think about what is loyalty, something like that experience is going to make me far more loyal to a brand than whether I was on 800 points or 900 points.
Exactly.
And it's going to make me talk about it, right?
Exactly. And it's moving, like you said. I think right now the question perhaps is shifting from who is giving me more points to who knows me more, to which brand knows me more and offers something that represents that they know me. Right. And agree with you as well, Amy, what you mentioned on like what they can expect. Like today, guests are expecting a level of personalization that goes beyond like, oh, you made your first booking and that's why you get 10 points. So that's why we talk about this shift going from points to relationship, because it's not just about accumulating points, but about adding this added value, right? And that has to do with how the brands get to know the guests as well.
And I think, you know, back in the day, it used to be the big brands like the Marriotts and the Accors that were the only ones doing those loyalty programs. But now, with all the personalization and tools that you have in your hands, you can be an independent and you can have a loyalty program that's specific to you. But I think, you know, my tip for that would be, what does loyalty mean? What does loyalty look like, you know, from your perspective? So I think, you know, loyalty programs are now open up to small independent properties, small brands, not just the big boys, because
Absolutely.
everyone has the data that they can use to create an emotional attachment to their property.
Exactly. And it doesn't need to be outstanding. Like what Mark was saying, like that example, it's something so small and so simple that you could take one guest at a time in this sense, and it's already giving an added value. So it doesn't need to be, oh, I'm a small brand, I can't do this. Like I need to stay on the traditional side, because now things are starting to shift. And on this point that we were just talking about, how now every brand, either big or small, can start accessing data to be able to do more and to offer more, right? Let's look a little bit into the role that guest feedback or reviews play here, because they can provide actual insights into guest loyalty as well. So, Amy, can you share how guest feedback or reviews can provide these insights into guest loyalty, and how can hotels use that data, right? Like going from the theory to the practice, how can they use that data that comes from feedback?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, it's about understanding your guests. Why do they book with you? Is it because you're close to an area? Is it because there's local events? You know, what demographic is booking? Is it the Gen Zs? Is it the millennials? Where are your reviews going to? Are they going to Google? Are they going to TripAdvisor? And it's about accumulating all of this data and putting it in one place so you can actually see those trends. So you can segment that data and go, okay, our guests love us because we are the cleanest hotel in our area. Or, you know, even using competitor data can really help you kind of understand why guests book you over your competitors. And taking that data and then really understanding your preferred profile, you know, which guests spend more money than you, which segments, where are they booking from? You know, how is my repeat guests booking? Are they coming back through bookings.com? You know, so you've got to look at all the different data points. You know, I think sometimes, you know, guests will book continually through bookings.com because maybe the hotelier is a little bit left behind and they don't mind the OTAs doing that work for them. But if you're using your feedback to understand your guests, why they book with you, and you're saying, you know, thanks so much for your feedback after you get a survey, when you book direct, here's a special, then they're much more likely to book back through your website than through bookings.com. So, you know, you just have to use your data points, understand what, you know, and why guests are booking with you. Can you work with, you know, other community businesses to create loyalty? So you can do specific segmentation to, you know, different types of people. Like it might be something like they know that you're into outdoor activities. There's a local event coming up, but they've got children. So you could offer, you know, free daycare for the day while the event goes on, so the parents can participate. You know, so it's not only about your feedback, it's about understanding your local area as well and the businesses that go on there. So I think you've got so many data points from your PMS to systems like Book Boost and different channels that you can reach out to different types of guests on. It's about, first of all, stopping, taking a look at your guest preferred profile, understanding where they're leaving those reviews, collating that data, and then going out and remarketing to them on the right channels.
Absolutely. And understanding a little bit more, because from what you mentioned, that's a clear example. If I get on my feedback that people are like 3 out of 5 guests love the massages, and all of these guests are coming from a specific country, then that already gives me an idea of like, okay, maybe I can create a campaign for guests coming from that specific country that in their loyalty level, that's one of the benefits that we that we offer them, right? But what we're saying today is not that loyalty programs are outdated and that you shouldn't have one and that you should only focus on being a guest-centric brand and so on. Because guests also love free stuff. Like guests love benefits. Like who doesn't? Like I like gifts, right? Like guests love what they can get out of accumulating points as well. What we are mentioning is that you should be aiming to find a balance. Like how can you enrich your program even more by adding this relationship component?
But I think that's where the question comes in. What does loyalty look like to you? You know, is it that a guest books multiple times? Or is it that a guest is, you know, leaving you online reviews? What really is loyalty to you and how should they be rewarded? You know, you can personalize at every step of the journey from when they book to your pre-stay email to, you know, understanding how they scored you on the last 3 days when you're checking them in and saying, look, you didn't like room 10 last time. We totally apologize. We've given you a free upgrade. You know, there's so many different ways to do personalization to make someone loyal to your brand. That it doesn't have to just be a loyalty program anymore. You know, it's also about cross communication, right? Like if your marketing team aren't on board with your reception team and personalizing that experience and delivering the same message, then you're never going to be customer centric. You're going to have and mixed messages. I don't know if Mark agrees with that.
Totally. I'm just laughing because the guest feedback side of it points us in all the right directions, right? That's it. Let's stop. Let's take a second. Let's listen to our guests. Right. Let's understand what they're talking about and what they're mentioning. But you're right, Jana. We don't have to totally do away with because I'm sure people are going, well, hang on. There's a lot of aspects about these loyalty programs that really work and really drive occupancy, and loyal guests are our cheapest channel, right? They're coming in, they're the ones booking direct. Those are the bookings we want, right? So that's not what I don't think that's what we're trying to say is just completely do away with that side of things. I think it's about taking some of the data that you've got and really understanding what's driving them. So that experience you mentioned, Hannah, okay, we know that from this particular country that massages, you know, if they stay for 3 nights, massages are always on the menu, right? This makes sense. Great. Let's focus down that road. Let's perhaps you've booked 3 times, right? Let's recognize and then let's make them feel valued. We see you've booked 3 times and massage is always on the menu. Why don't we give you know, a discount on that? Or, you know, there is a way to take that and make it feel relevant to me. Again, like I said, all these Black Friday offers and different emails that I've received, and I look at some of them and I go, you've offered me something that is just, it's not in my wheelhouse. It's got nothing to do with me. I don't know what, if all it's made me feel is that you know nothing about me.
Exactly. That I'm an email.
So it actually makes me turn away from the brand a little bit. It's like, I feel like I am just a number to you. And I think sometimes that's what those numbers and tiers and things can make people feel. I am just someone who fits into a box that says platinum status. Or wouldn't that be nice? Probably silver status for me. But instead, actually, you know all these things about me. You can reward me. You can still reward and drive that loyal channel by utilizing what you know about me.
Absolutely.
Right? And so those benefits that we talk about aren't lost. They're actually seen as value, right? And they're driving what we're hoping to drive, which is loyalty, not just, I got a cheaper stay, cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think now we're starting to talk a little bit more about how marketing in hospitality needs to move away from the transaction to focus on the relationship. And it has to do a lot with what we are discussing today, because a transactional approach is exactly like what we are discussing. You see your customers as an email, as a number, and then there's one, this is the book, the purchase is done, and then bye-bye, and you never hear from me until the time I'm interested again in that you booked, right? However, if the focus is on the relationship, we are aiming in to build something in the long term. And that's where you build loyal guests. And for that to happen, you need to know them. And I know that maybe a lot of people is thinking like, oh, you know what? I have like 2 people working with me. I have no time to do that. Like that will mean spending weeks like looking at my data and so on. And actually it's not true. Because I think right now technology is making things way easier. It's helping you to understand your guest more effectively and efficiently than before. You don't need to spend weeks now. You can actually access to reports that show you where are they coming from, what are they liking, what are their preferences, and so on and so on. So these things can be accelerated a little bit, and it's not so hard. Mm-hmm. And actually what we want to talk now is about how we go from this theory to the practice, right? So Mark, let's talk from a guest experience perspective. So what are practical ways that hotels can go beyond the traditional transactional interactions to create these meaningful relationships that we are talking about? So some practical steps, and especially if we can go from the easiest level to show everyone that you can start tomorrow if you wanted to.
Absolutely. A lot of people, whoa, hang on, how do I do this? I don't have enough staff. I don't have enough time. How do I actually get from where I am today to what you're discussing now? And the answer is you probably already have a huge amount of data that you're just not leveraging, right? That you're just not taking a look at. Your PMS holds data already and tells us information about our guests already. I saw in the comments there, we could ask questions like, are you a couple coming from a certain place? And the things, we don't even need to ask those questions. That information's coming from the booking. So if you just stop and think, what is your current guest journey? What information are you getting from those guests at each of those different touch points, right? When a guest makes a booking, what information am I getting? When a guest just pre-arrival, what information am I getting? Getting all of these touch points, when they've post-stay given me feedback, all these different touch points allow me to paint a picture of who this guest actually is. Yes, there are obviously tools, and that's what we that's what we do. There is technology that makes all of this way easier. But I think as a starting point, you could just simply go, do I know, is this guest business or leisure? Is this guest couple, family, solo? Is this, I can start to behave slightly differently. I think one of the other points about moving away from the kind of point-focused thing is that it shifts the way we deliver hospitality into being very transactional. And actually, loyalty needs to be this thing that we earn. As a hotel, you should earn that loyalty, right? We should be going, how do I deliver a great experience so that they become loyal? Not loyal because I've given them some points, or loyal because I gave them 10% discount, or whatever it might be, but loyal because I've delivered this fantastic experience. And so if you shift away towards that, and your staff are all working on how do I deliver a great experience, sometimes knowing just a little bit about someone helps you deliver that. That example I gave, I know they have a dairy allergy. I'm going to put oat milk in the fridge. I've taken a moment, and perhaps I've guaranteed myself 5 new bookings from this guest. This guest might never come back to me. They might, however, tell all their friends. They might tell everyone. You'll see that in the feedback, Amy, just even the NPS scores, but it obviously digs a lot deeper than that. And there's another point back to what I was saying, Hannah, how can I start right now? Let me understand my feedback. They're giving feedback all the time across all channels, right? And that is going out to the world.
Exactly.
So let me engage with it. Let me understand it. I think we can't ignore all the data that we have. You can then take the next step and go, how do I really leverage this data? How do I bring it together? How do I start to understand it? And so you build that up. But I think today's starting point is really, I've got data, and there are a lot of properties who are choosing not to pay attention to it. So let's move away from that transactional. You booked, you paid this much, I gave you a key, and that's all I have to do. Now let's create experience. Let's really deliver on experience. How do I do that? I know a bit more about you to make it exceptional. How do I give you that little thing that's going to make it memorable?
You know, I think also, Mark, sometimes just the simplest thing is getting people to opt into email marketing, right? So people say, yeah, I do that on check-in. And I'm like, but they haven't had that experience yet. So they haven't fallen in love with your brand and what you offer. So apart from on the check-in, when you ask them, do they want to opt in? Are you asking them anywhere else? No. So do that in your post-date email. Gather their personal email addresses as well. Because if they're coming through the likes of bookings.com and Expedia, you're not going to have their personal information. And with GDPR and Poppy and all of the different acts, you've got to be compliant. So, you know, if you're not asking people to opt in at certain points, you know, maybe look at that as a starting point, because then you're gathering that reliable database to remarket to. If you try and remarket to people that, you know, don't want their 8th coffee like Mark, then you're just wasting your time. You're never going to be successful. So, you know, just check your data points. It can be as simple as asking them to opt in, you know, once they've started to fall in love with your brand.
Totally. I think nothing could be more painful than someone who's booked through an OTA. You go and look at your data and you see that the same guest has stayed with you 3 times, but they've booked through an OTA all 3 times. You know,
and you get what, 80% commission on that?
If they've booked through the OTA first time, fine, but you know, it should be your job driving that experience and collecting the data. Exactly.
What are you doing to change that? Exactly. And I think maybe if I like about like starting small, I think there's no smaller step that the one you don't take. So if you are taking something from this session today, is that grab your data and start answering questions. Look at your feedback. What is my biggest complaint? What are they always complaining about? What is the most common point that they're complaining about? What is the point that they are always praising, that they are always saying it was the best of my brand? If you start to get that knowledge, right, then you already have a first step into what can you offer, what you shouldn't be mentioning, and so on and so on. And let's continue on the point of what can they do, like being practical, but now let's look about metrics and indicators. So Amy, what would you say are some of the key metrics or indicators that hoteliers should track to measure guest loyalty, but beyond the traditional point-based system? Because we know the ones that are the most common ones, right? The ones that show you loyalty, but what if we are moving away from the point system? If we're trying to do something a little bit more relationship focused, then what are the metrics that we should be looking at?
You know, so with surveys, for example, we find that, you know, the higher the guest experience score, the higher the property will have response rates. So, you know, you can start looking at your response rate. Is your messaging on point to that guest? Is it delivering the same sort of feeling, you know, through that survey and that sort of thing, which then pulls into the NPS score, which Mark pulled in, which typically comes from survey data. So anybody doesn't know where that orientates from, it comes from the question, how likely are you to recommend us to friends or family? And it's rated on an 11-point scale. And your promoters are people that score you a 9 or a 10 on that question. Passives are people that score you a 7 or 8, and your detractors are people that score you a 6 or below. So, you know, your promoters are really people that, even if they, you know, stay in the US and you're a UK property and that it's going to be the only time they travel to the UK, it doesn't mean that they're not going to go home and tell their friends and family. So when somebody, you know, does fly over, they recommend you, you know, you're still going to get business, even if it's not directly from that particular guest. So it's always a really good one to follow. You know, and I also think, you know, how many times have they stayed with you? Are they completing multiple surveys? Are they giving you multiple online reviews? How well do you know this guest? How big is this profile? Is the stay that they had on on their first day the same as they had on their last day. I see somebody's asking about, what about your general KPIs? Yeah, absolutely, they're important. You know, you've got your overall satisfaction, your location, your room quality, and you've got all of those as well. They're really key metrics for operationally. You know, so you can see where your hotel's performing really well. And, you know, you can segment that data, or you should be able to segment that data down to guests that gave you a really high net promoter score, that loved your rooms, you know, that left you a TripAdvisor review, and vice versa. You should be able to separate it to the guests that didn't have a great stay. So you can send them out a different type of messaging saying, look, you know, we totally understand that you had a lumpy mattress. We've actually exchanged that from your feedback, and we'd love to give you a 20% discount when you book next and stay in one of our brand new king size beds. You know, that you can turn a positive into a negative all the time. So some of the KPIs will depend on what you offer and what you want to offer. So always understand your brand, understand what you want to achieve, and make sure that you're asking the right questions. You know, if you're wanting to start a loyalty program, you know, there's no reason why you can't ask guests what loyalty would look like to them in a survey, for example. That way you make sure you get it on brand point, right?
Exactly. What
Yeah.
would you like to receive? For example, like what would be a like a special benefit for you? That's a very personalized question, I would say. Like that, you're gonna get a very personalized answer because every guest will think different things, right? And I think it's really key what you mentioned here about knowing your brand, because loyalty will also change, as you mentioned before, Amy, from brand to brand. So you have hotels where, I don't know, where it's very uncommon that someone goes back to that city, for example, right? And then in those hotels, maybe if someone comes back twice, that is enough to become a loyal guest, because it's a hotel where normally people don't come back because of the location, because of the city. It's a once in a lifetime trip or something like that. Whilst you also have other places that it's very busy cities, like where work trips are very common, so it's very easy to get a guest to come back 5 times. So maybe they say, for us, loyalty is after they come back after a certain amount of times, after we had like certain interactions, while other hotels will be, no, for us it's a more simple approach, right?
Yeah,
It
and I
really
think,
has to do with your brand.
you know, if you've got brands in multiple locations, when a guest stays at one of your properties, if they're then going and staying in, you know, Manchester, for example, and they've stayed in your London property, that Manchester property needs to have the same guest experience or better than the property that they originally booked in. So when you're looking at group guest feedback, you should be able to see a leaderboard to make sure that that brand experience is across the board on brand point, and you're hitting your score targets, whatever that KPI looks like for the brand. It should be consistent across all of your properties, because that will create brand loyalty within the brand.
Absolutely. When we're talking about groups, then the figure changes, because then you really need to understand your data across properties. It's not enough to just focus on one, right?
Yeah.
Because you're thinking like, oh, he came back twice, and then in your other property, he's already been there like 3 times. So like it's a person that really likes your brand in general, like your group brand. So definitely, I would say it varies a lot depending whether you are an independent hotel, a group chain, your location, and your culture as well. So I would say the main takeaway for today is that go take a look at your data and about what you have to offer, what your guests are saying about you, and then you can set a starting point and start thinking about, how do I want to put this together? What do I want to do? What do my guests actually want? And I can help them with.
I mean, but also, what do you want your loyalty program to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, in a down season when it's quiet, you know, loyalty programs will help you put bums in beds, right? That's probably why they were originally created. But now, you know, it's a very emotional experience when you go and stay. It's not just about bums in beds. People want an experience, and you've got to live up to that. Mark, I didn't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Well, we're in a far more competitive market now, right? Than maybe 5, 10 years ago. And we're all far more tech savvy and we're all able to find exactly what we need with a simple Google search. And with that competition, you've got to be able to stand out, or you've got to be able to create something slightly different. That slightly different doesn't that comes from an experience that people have. And I think that's what people are searching for. Like I said, I think we come out of, if COVID taught us anything, is that people are desperate for experiences. And that's what makes us feel connected to things. So how do we drive that experiential thing?
I really don't think, you know, a lot of guests don't book just because you're the cheapest property. It's not about necessarily bang for buck. If you offer a unique experience and they're willing to pay that price, they will book with you. So you've got to look at your brand. You've got to understand your brand. You've got to understand your messaging. You've got to understand your guest. And you've got to get it right on so many different levels nowadays. But it's super easy to do when you've got your tech stack right. So when your PMS talks to your guest experience, your feedback system, when it then feeds back into your CRM, when it goes to, you know, Book Boost and things like that, and then it differentiates the marketing out correctly on the right channels with the right messaging. That hoteliers have never had so much technology at their fingertips, and I don't think they've ever been so open to it. I think COVID really opened that up for them. You know, so look at your tech stack, look at what you can do and where you can do it to send the right messages out to the right types of people, I think.
Yeah, well, your tech doesn't have to. I think people get nervous that tech gets in the way of all of this. I've given examples of how I've felt like just a number because I'm being targeted through a one size fits all email. I think that people are a bit more savvy to that kind of thing now. So part of your digital guest experience, it adds to the overall experience, and we can't ignore that anymore. It's not just a booking confirmation.
Yeah,
right? It's that whole journey becomes part of my actual experience, right? And in some cases these days, with more modern approaches, there are completely staffless properties or this, that, and they're still able to deliver a level of experience digitally that's making a guest feel valued. I'm not saying you have to go all that way, but there's the potential to enhance experience through the digital tools by making somebody feel genuinely valued. You understand me, even though it's an email, right? And I do recognize that hoteliers are very scared of that. That hospitality should be in the hands of the people welcoming you at the front door. But I don't think that's the world we live in anymore. I think it's both. And so we need to approach both with the same effort and the same value on personalization.
Absolutely. And yes, go for it.
It can be, you know, it can be as simple as responding to your Google and TripAdvisor reviews, guys. You know, if somebody's taken the time to write you a message, whether positive or negative, you know, go do yourself a favor and go respond to that and do it personalized, because it's not even about the guest that wants that review. It's about the potential guests reading it. So if that's what your time allows you to do and where you can start, then start there.
Yeah, and I just wanted to read this comment that we received, right? So someone says, I don't mind being a number as long as it's the right number. Put me in the right group, traveling with young children, traveling with conference, and I'm happy. So but exactly, that's kind of like what we're saying, in the sense that like you need to understand then who is your guest. That's where it feels irrelevant. If I'm not a person with children and suddenly I get these like, oh, by the way, we recognize your loyalty. Next time you come, you have a family show, right? Discount in your family show for your children. And I'm like, what? But that doesn't apply to me. That doesn't make me feel like loyal. On the contrary, I'm definitely like unsubscribing, right? So I totally agree. It's about putting people where they belong, in the sense of like recognizing their characteristics, just like we are discussing, that it's make me feel like you actually want me to be there, like, you know, like you actually want my subscription, and not just like, yeah, whatever.
we all know this feeling when you call, I don't know, some service providers, and you get stuck on this loop where they go, oh, hang on, I've got to put you through to this person. And you get through to that person, and you start that whole journey again. This is my name. This is where I'm from. This is what I do. Blah, blah, blah. They go, okay, you're in the wrong department. I'm going to put you through to this person. And that person answers the phone and says, hi, who are you? That feeling, if I just take this back to your original question, how does it all make you feel? That feeling makes me feel, firstly, very frustrated, but totally undervalued as a customer. That feeling that you just don't know me, and that I'm being passed around, and that now I'm speaking to one of your colleagues. I've just told you all this information. Now your colleague's asking me, start again, right? There is tech available to prevent that feeling, and that feeling should never enter hospitality. Right? That is the furthest feeling from hospitality, or should be. So let's use the tech. Let's leverage it. Let's really allow the guests to feel different.
Absolutely. And that feeling is what takes you the farthest away from loyalty as well, which is our main topic for today.
Exactly.
We've reached the end of our webinar. Actually, thank you so much, everyone, for your comments, your questions, and thank you both, Amy and Mark. The main takeaway for today for me is that everyone can start doing something. It is about, you can set little steps. Go look in your data, see what you find, see what you can do with it. You need to understand your guests to be able to provide this special feeling, to go and create relationships with them. So thank you so much, guys, for all your input, and we see you in our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.